If Suppression Field is wrong, I don't want to be right. Hello folks, Phil Gallagher, aka ThrabenU here for another Legacy video. Now, Joe had donated to see the jacked rabbit suppression field deck list that we played against on stream. And I received Joe's donation immediately after I had already recorded with the rabbits. And spoilers if you haven't seen that video, we got our butts kicked. Now, Joe shouted out specifically that they wanted to see the suppression field aspect of the deck. So what I decided to do here was kind of turn that first one I did into Joe's deck list, and the second one into a dealer's choice suppression field deck list. And I think that's going to leave everyone happy. So here's what I came up with. Roughly a year ago, I played a relatively interesting league where we tried to play a white prison pillow fort deck list. And I decided that I would try to update that based on what we learned from that league. And in that league, we learned that Court of Grace was surprisingly strong. Drawing an extra card every turn while also making a 4/4 angel creature is certainly worth 4 mana. Now, you do need to protect this card, right? You need to protect the Monarch from your opponent. So rather than building these stacks piece-oriented deck lists like I often do, I decided to build a removal-oriented deck list that gets a bunch of value from Court of Grace, allowing us to hold the Monarch. And if we have multiple copies of Court of Grace, well, we can make a whole bunch of flyers. And now, you know my feelings about Psychic Frog. If we are making a flying creature every turn, that in theory allows us to chump block a Psychic Frog forever until we draw a piece of removal for it. And I'm going to play 4 swords, 4 Path to Exiles, and in the 75, 4 copies of Solitude to make sure that we are not just losing to one large creature. Restoration of Aganjo is going to be kind of our mid-range card advantage value plan, sort of like you might see Fable of the Mirrorbreaker from a red deck of this nature. Very interestingly, the middle ability gets around counterspells. You may discard a card. When you do, return target permanent with mana value 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So this can be a way to uncounterably cheat in a critical card, which is kind of cool. So we are playing Mox Diamonds that can discard lands. We can return those lands later on directly to play if we need to. And if we want to recur something like Wasteland, this allows us to do so. The deck building here is not perfect. Suppression Field is symmetrical. Activated abilities cost 2 more to activate unless they're mana abilities. So this is going to make our Wastelands cost extra mana when we do have a Suppression Field, but we're not always going to want to have a suppression field, and we would like to at least slightly constrain our opponent's resources with things like Wasteland and White Orchid Phantom, which can also serve as a ramp spell if we need to with flagstones, and then we can bring the flagstones back if we want, and hopefully this is enough value to kind of get there. We have a little bit of game 1 game versus combo, but as this sideboard is very clearly suggesting, we're hoping to make up for game 1 weaknesses versus combo in the post sideboard games, where we're packing a play set of Deafening Silence that we can then bring back with Restoration of Aganjo if they do get destroyed. So yeah, this is a little wild and crazy, Joe. I hope you end up liking this one. Folks, if you need any cards for this or another Legacy deck, please consider checking out my sponsor, TOAMagic.com. They have all sorts of awesome old cards. You're looking for dual lands, you're looking for power, they probably have it, and promo code ThrabenU saves you 5% on your order, and who doesn't like saving money, especially on big purchases like dual lands. Let's battle. Okay, this hand exemplifies something that I say a lot on the channel, and that is a hand that has a lock piece and no follow-up play is not a keep. Especially on the draw here, where my opponent could already have fetched and Suppression Field is not going to be shutting off their initial fetch land. This is fine, right? So turn 1, Flagstones, Mox Diamond, discard a Plains, White Orchid Phantom, blow up Flagstones, ramp into Court of Grace. That sounds fantastic. And if my opponent is playing some Eldrazi lands, we can pivot a little bit. Green? Infect? Dryad Arbor? Maybe something in the Elves ballpark? Could be something in the Nadu ballpark. So, yeah. Discard a land. I don't think I'm going to go for killing the Dryad Arbor here. It has some utility versus Gaia's Cradle, but I think I am just ramping myself. So, we pick up a land. Yes. We pick up a second land. And pass the turn here with Court of Grace available next turn. Archon of Ameria if we believe that we need to slow down our opponent because we are expecting some combo nonsense. Okay, so Gaia's Cradle sort of stuff obviously going to be very strong moving forward. So making non-basic lands enter tapped might be a really big deal. If my opponent is going wide with Springheart and Nantucko, it's also going to be a little hard to hold the Monarch here. My ideal draw is probably a Swords to Plowshares type card that can remove this before it generates more bodies. Ancient Tomb, not fantastic here. I think I am going to go ahead and stop a Gaia's Cradle from entering untapped, and we'll start hitting in the air. We are potentially facing down a Nadu deck that could just end up going infinite relatively quickly, or if not infinite, getting enough cards so that it becomes difficult for me to win. All right, there is the Nadu. So now, hey, we played around that. But I am certainly scared. Court of Grace is not strong against this board. That doesn't help. In fact, quite bad. They don't attack through that Nadu now. I think I'm trying to get a little lucky here. We're going to Court of Grace. This is my one spell for this turn. But I am going to become the Monarch. And if we draw into a Swords to Plowshares Path to Exile style effect, I can fire that off in my opponent's upkeep or something like that. Oh, fuck, do you have a fucking Court of Calling? Shit. That is no bueno. That is a Nomad's Encore, which means that my opponent can now do the Nadu thing. I'm going to fast forward to this at the end, because this is going to be relatively boring. My opponent can target their stuff 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16 times here, and draw an absolutely absurd number of cards. Okay, my opponent has moved to their turn. They have a ton of creatures. They have 18 cards in hand. I expect that my opponent is just going to cast an Emrakul, take an extra turn, and obliterate me that way, and I am perfectly fine conceding to that. Yeah, no, that'll do. You can only cast one spell. Make that spell Emrakul. Now, unfortunately, the Nadu combo doesn't really involve my opponent casting very many spells, so this Deafening Silence, Thorn of Amethyst style stuff isn't particularly good. Moat not stopping the curve-ending Emrakul. Moat not stopping Nadu attacks. We'll probably go a little heavier on Solitudes here. Don't think I like how this is lining up on paper. Suppression Field is good versus the combo, but we're just going to get out mid-range a decent amount of the time. Let's go down a couple of those to make room for the extra 2 removal spells. Double Mox Diamond, 1 lander. Nope. Flagstones, Chrome Mox, Imprint Solitude, White Orchid Phantom, Flagstones to ramp, play Court of Grace. Yeah, that seems fine. White Orchid Phantom on turn 1, allowing us to curve into 4-drops is cool. Although I guess I have kind of gotten lucky in that I have lined up Flagstones with White Orchid Phantom with a piece of artifact mana and the ability to use it multiple games in a row. Boop. Pick up 2 planes and call it a turn. The mana from our opponent into a Mana Dork. Now, a Mana Dork can contest initiative. We're not doing initiative stuff this turn, though, after that draw, though. We are just going to take out 2 of our opponent's mana sources and assume that this is better for me than it is for my opponent. Now I expect my opponent to have a decent amount of mana, and it wouldn't even be crazy for them to have another mana dork. That's not a mana dork. It's a reasonable card. It's something that can contest initiative. Would love another land here to just slam Court of Grace. Not quite. Send it. 16. Now this is not true green mana for the purposes of something like a green sun, so that's nice. Cradle, very strong. There is a bestowed Springheart Nantucko. Unsure if that is good or bad for me. No attack into a bunch of open white mana. Ah! I really want to play this fucking Court of Grace. Gaia's Cradle is kind of public enemy number 1 when my opponent has a bestowed Springheart Nantucko, though. Believe in the deck. Believe in the deck. Believe in all the mana sources I have. Attack for 2. I'm not sure if my play was right, but when you have the option to not make, or to not allow Gaia's Cradle to go unchecked, it is probably correct to do so. Like, that Gaia's Cradle after my opponent fetches is worth 3 mana this turn, which is a little absurd. And the Allosaur Shepherd interaction is kind of neat here. This is an elf, right? So if my opponent starts making copies of this when my opponent gets to 6 mana off, say, a Gaia's Cradle, they can then just do their overrun effect with those copies, and it is good. All right, just making the insect and chilling. Mox Diamond, not what I'm looking for. I can attack for 2 and potentially get attacked for 4 back, but that hasn't been happening. My opponent is afraid of some white flash creature, and I am going to continue to be the aggressor and hope that they don't attack me. They might be playing around something like a Ganjo that I can only use in combat. It's really weird for a deck like mine to have 3 cards in hand and 3 mana on board and not be able to do anything with that. All right. Nadu getting into play is officially scary now. Got away with that shit. Fantastic. That's not the best. It's not bad. Just go, little buddy. Opponent's at 9. I will play the Suppression Field to make it less likely that we get comboed out by this. The unfortunate thing here is that my... Okay. What are we doing? Port of Calling. I see. So that is going to get a Nadu, unfortunately. So my opponent is going to do the bullshit with my Suppression Field on the stack. Daggers. At this point, I think I'm just going to concede. My opponent is going to draw a billion cards here. My hand is junk. I don't think this is worth sitting through. GG's. Today's video is sponsored by moxfield.com, and I could say all sorts of great things about them, but I'm just going to point to this number. I have 488 deck lists stored on this site. That should give you a feel for how I feel about this website. And if you were to go to my profile, you could see all the deck lists that I'm messing around with, including my EDH decks, and you can even see some of the deck lists I record with before they hit the channel. Ooh. Opening hand here has colorless mana and not white mana. That is not going to do it. This second hand is a thing. It's probably turn 2 Archon, and I decide whether or not I'm keeping this castable spell or this maybe higher utility creature. Either way, if I don't like them, I can end up pitching them to Solitude. I think I'm going to get rid of, I don't know, Suppression Field plus Archon is like kind of a thing. Like the land comes into play tapped and then I can Suppression Field it. What if I get rid of Solitude? I'm already down a card. All right, I've talked myself into that. Plains go. Okay, let me get to my turn. Let me get to my turn. Please. Please. The counterspell? Yes. All right, opponent is chilling. They've intentionally chosen to make this land enter untapped. I am going to be slamming Archon into this, just kind of regardless. I think it's most likely that my opponent is just going to play something like a Brainstorm in response, or is holding up some sort of Spell Pierce style interaction. Archon might dodge whatever it is that they have. Show and tell. Understood. Okay, it was Brainstorm. That read was correct. So, my opponent probably has basic lands, so White Orchid Phantom is probably not actual factual land destruction. There's the show and tell. I think I put in Suppression Field for if my opponent does something like a Grizzlebrand or a Sneak Attack. The White Orchid Phantom entering play is probably not that big of a deal. It is Omniscience. Bad news for Phil fans. And I say this specifically. Hey, we are stopping the card draw from that. That's very good for us. Yeah, so I get a turn. In good news, I'm alive. In bad news, I can't cast my threat, and my 3 single target removal spells are a little unlikely to matter. In good news, it is currently costing my opponent life to draw cards. And it's a lot of life, because it's 2 life from the Ancient Tomb to pay for Suppression Field, and then it is 1 life for the 1 ring the following turn. So assuming that I can get a threat into play, this isn't actually all that bad. If we can steal game 1, I have a decent number of things for the post-sideboard games, like Deafening Silences and Thorn of Amethyst, that can help keep us alive for a little while longer. And be countered. Strong. Protection from spells that are 1 or more colors. Stronger. Concede dead GG's. So, primary problem here is that these cards aren't particularly good. We want the Deafening Silences, we want the Thorn of Amethysts. I'll probably play Solitude over some number of these cards. The Swords and Paths can do some things against some targets that my opponent could put in if they are playing things like Atraxa or Grizzlebrand, but they're not necessarily going to be great. Moat, similarly, not exactly an all-star. And then we'll probably just trim one of these. Solitudes can be put in off a show and tell if our opponent just goes and shoves just show and tell for a creature. Do not have white mana here. Despite having a bunch of really good cards, this is just not going to work. Mox Diamond, discard a land, Ancient Tomb, Archon of Emeria. This is great. Yeah, I'm really happy with this one. We'll keep the basic and the Caracas and the Ancient Tomb, get rid of the Flagstones, just kind of hedging against some sort of weird back-to-basic Blood Moon type thing that occasionally happens from these style of decks. So, yeah, and Archon. Alright, we're in play. So my opponent's fetch lands, very importantly, are now going to enter tapped. This gives me a decent amount of time to do some nonsense. Opponent next leveling me by playing a land that ETB tapped anyway, and giving the middle fingers to my Archon. Suppression Field Archon, confirmed combo. Suppression Field Caracas, confirmed non-bow, though. If my opponent plays a fetch land at ETB's tapped anyway, I can Suppression Field next turn. So we're going to go ahead and play our 4-drop that we've built this deck around, and try to not play another threat for the rest of the game. Like, if I can spend the rest of this game slamming Suppression Field, Archons, that sort of stuff, Thorn of Amethysts, that would be great for me personally. Love that. Ponder. I don't think I like playing the tapped Ancient Tomb prior to the Ponder. Like, you can play a fetch land and then upkeep shuffle still. But if my opponent just has show and tell already, it may be a moot point. So the Deafening Silence is a little redundant with the Archon here. I can't activate Caracas with Suppression Field around anyway. So with this turn, I probably just play Suppression Field to help out with things like the One Ring, and then crash in for my 2. Technical sequencing is attack first, but it doesn't matter in this matchup. We're not expecting a wild Pyrokinesis or anything. Alright, tapped fetch land. That fetch land is very weak right now. And my Court of Grace is taking over this game. Like, we have the soft lock in play with these Suppression Fields and Archons, and that is just letting Court of Grace spiral out of control. So this is 6 damage here, followed by lethal next turn. I can convert Ancient Tomb into a land to deny 1 mana. I can also just play Thorn of Amethyst for a similar effect. I'm at 16 life. 16 is not 15. Big deal. If my opponent casts Show and Tell, I'd love to put in Thorn of Amethyst rather than White Orchid Phantom. But this is a better card, assuming that my spells do resolve. Force of Will, pitching Force of Will. That's fine. We draw a Mox Diamond. Not particularly strong. My opponent needs to combo off through Archon and Suppression Field this turn, or they are dead. Well, I guess they could answer a creature and stay alive for another turn. So, let's see what they've got. A Petty Theft style card could do it. They don't have it. Yeah, this is the Court of Grace that I wanted to get going in the previous game. Do I play another one? This rebuys my things that get countered, but maybe I still just want to do that. That got my opponent dead so quickly. This is a fucking hand. Yeah, I'm in for this. It's weird, but I'm in for it. Okay, that's not actually all that good. So, Mox Diamond, discard a land. Mox Diamond, discard a land. Cast a Deafening Silence. If this gets countered, I can just play another, and I'm giving my opponent an opportunity to fetch prior to making any decisions. So now I can't play another Deafening Silence. I will just make my land drop and pass the turn. The hope is that I draw a land, slam Court of Grace, and then start drawing extra things. Okay. I don't have a Wasteland target, but hopefully Deafening Silence holds off my opponent for a little while. Oh, this is some interesting tension here. So, cast Suppression Field. My opponent can fetch in response. If they fetch a Wastelandable land, I can Wasteland that. Otherwise, my Wasteland becomes worse. So there's the fetch. There's a basic so that my Wasteland is not impactful. Now I'm passing the turn. Still waiting for that fourth land for Court of Grace. Or fourth mana source, rather. Opponent's just got a land drop. They can use their mana to fetch. Alright, there we go. So here is my win condition. Got my lock pieces established. This is going to be worth 4 damage, then 8 damage, and so on. Force of Will, obviously strong. Pitching a Wipe Away, which is a split second card. Haven't seen that one in a hot minute. There's the fetch. Opponent continuing to get basics, which makes sense with onboard Wasteland. Okay, cool. That's their one spell, so we're not getting comboed. The cantrip engine has grinded to a halt. So my opponent can't just like ponder, then brainstorm, then preordain or whatever to assemble their A plus B, potentially plus C as well. Archon of Emeria is a win condition. I think I would rather just Wasteland my opponent's Ancient Tomb. Yeah. So I think I'm going to play Deafening Silence as my one spell for the turn, and then Wasteland my opponent's Ancient Tomb in their upkeep. Or I'll do it at end step if they do something like an Intuition here that just uses their mana. Okay, they did not. So, destroy Ancient Tomb. Alright, it's happening. Opponent puts in Omniscience. That's their one spell for this turn. So, Archon versus Deafening Silence difference does matter here. So let's attack in for 2. And then we'll play another Archon afterwards. This is a scary spot. My opponent's got 2 cards. They haven't been able to cantrip very much this game. They did not play an instant on my own turn. It is a second Omniscience as their spell. We're still in this. I don't want more Deafening Silence effects. All right. So we're gonna play these because my permanent count for the purposes of Emrakul, the Aeon's Torn, absolutely matters. There's an Abrade, 13. Drop a new Deafening Silence. Woohoo! Okay. Opponent played out everything, letting me know that like it is safe. Send in 11. I don't think I need to Wasteland my opponent's Tropical Island. Their spells are already free via Omniscience. I'm just going to pass the turn here, keep this in case I draw a Court of Grace. Ha! Shit! Alright, so I sack this. And if memory serves, I have boarded out most of my removal spells. I can draw a land followed by a Solitude, and that might do it. Yep. That's not going to do it. I think I am now dead. Because I get attacked for 9 by the Archon, plus another 2 from the Spirit Guide. My opponent draws some extra cards, and I can't top deck Solitude as an out to this. So I think I am just dead next turn. Yep, that'll do it. GG's. That was pretty close. Whew. All right, single land here, not quite doing it for my purposes. Let's mulligan this one. This is not super strong. I can use this to essentially ramp, but the 3/4 Vigilant payoff is not necessarily the best. It might be better for me to go to 5. 5-card hand is not bad. If I ignore trying to play Suppression Field on turn 1, which I think I am going to do, I can just keep a hand with 2 removal spells and some ability to fight back versus fetch lands and unfair combo decks. I think I'm down with that. You can also make the argument to not keep both copies of Swords to Plowshares and instead keep the Ancient Tomb so that I can play a top-decked Court of Grace. But answering Psychic Frog and Friends is really central to the format right now, as are things like Eldrazi. So I think I am into having the out. We could be playing against something like Painter here. Rustvale Bridge is interesting. All right, we're just going to stay the course here, play the Suppression Field. I don't know exactly what's going on over there. Rustvale Bridge may mean that my opponent has affinity cards. It may mean that this is just a land that they don't want to be destroyed for their splash color. Could mean Mox Opal is a thing that's going on over there. No. No, 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 no. Oh. Okay, Mox Opal was a correct call. No Metalcraft yet. Land for Archon would be gas. Negative. Okay, well, we're killing creatures if my opponent has them. This is where we would love to have that Ancient Tomb from the initial opening hand, but you don't get to keep it all. My opponent is sacking the Lotus Petal to fetch. That means that they are further away from Mox Opal, which is great. Lots of artifact lands. But what are you doing? Okay, that's fine. Like, using 2 Swords to Plowshares on this is not really where I want to be, but it seems to be where I'm at. And then end of turn for mana efficiency, we'll just take that out. Oh, Ancient Tomb, where art thou? Yeah, having Archon last turn into Court of Grace this turn would have been game winning. But we are a 25 land deck that is also playing some amount of Moxen on top of that. That is an unearth thing that could happen. Painter's Servant. Sure. So the call of Painter was correct. Unfortunately, there's kind of 3 things we're working with here that need to be Swords to Plowshared, and I have 2 Swords to Plowshares. We are going to take out the onboard card. Land drop is nice. We'll drop an Archon, and we're probably taking out Reflection of Kiki-Jiki with the last Swords to Plowshares that I have. Land enters tapped. Fucking stop it! Oh, that's awkward. It's pretty good, but it's awkward. So, we are going to become the Pretty Pretty Princess and pass the turn. And I'm going to hold back here. We're going to try to make it so that my opponent puts themselves into a position where I can blow them out with Swords to Plowshares. And then just like untap, do Court of Grace nonsense. Getting rid of 2 blasts. Alright. Suppression Field does some work versus Urza Saga, although my opponent has a decent amount of mana here. That's fine. Suppression Field is a thing. Okay, so if I Swords to Plowshares this token, I remain the Monarch, and I get to make my 4/4 that helps hold the ground. It leaves this around, which is like not the best. So we can play this game of trading the Monarch back and forth, or I can just kind of keep the Monarch forever if I remove this. Reflection of Kiki-Jiki, Phyrexian Dragon Engine is scary. I think I'm going to play the game of allowing my opponent to take Monarch once. Because like there's 2 Reflection of Kiki-Jikis coming, and I am not the biggest fan of letting my opponent have 2 of those. Or even 1 of them, honestly. Alright, so my opponent is now the Monarch. My opponent's going to sacrifice that token, draw a card. I'm going to Swords the Reflection of Kiki-Jiki, use my 1 spell well. So get out. And assuming no Lightning Bolt, I'm just going to attack. I'm going to still get to make a 1/1 Spirit. I'm going to get to draw an additional card. Path is perfectly fine versus something like Phyrexian Dragon Engine that might be coming in to attempt to take Monarch. So this is fine. So yeah, Draw another card. Sure. Now, Urza Saga is good value, but it is a whopping 4 mana to activate, meaning it's hard for my opponent to do something else at the same time. Goblin Engineer. Sure. That threatens Painter's Servant. And obviously Painter's Servant Grindstone. Real good. So I probably need to get rid of this one so that I don't get comboed out. This would be 3 mana plus 5 mana, 8 mana. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's totally doable. So we will go ahead and take out the Goblin Engineer. Would not mind drawing more removal. We'll make a 4/4 this time since I am currently the Monarch. Ooh, that helps. I'm going to play my land drop because I'm going to draw an additional card. I'm going to play a Suppression Field, see if my opponent activates Urza Saga in response. They don't. That's now 6 to activate. That's not happening. Well, I guess it could happen. It would be costly. I don't know that I attack still, though. I think I'm turtling up, just having extra creatures just in case. Sure. I'm looking for more removal spells. My opponent cost themselves treasure tokens that they did not need to lose. Alright. So these are 6/6s. They're big. Reflection of Kiki Jiki can turn them into 7/7s or 8/8s after an extra artifact here. Sure. Okay. Opponent giving up a Reflection of Kiki Jiki activation. That seems like a really big deal to me. We'll just jump block here. That's perfectly fine. Now not giving up a Reflection of Kiki Jiki activation, Suppression Field. Hey, we take those. So we will Court of Grace another time. Now I'm getting 2 4/4s every turn. I would love to draw removal here, though. Negative. I think there's a good chance that I'm losing this one. I think I have a better chance at winning if my opponent plays too conservatively. Yeah, this is what I did not want to see. That's rough. That's another Painter. Or they can get something other than Painter, because I already have a Painter in the yard. So I can block, hold Monarch, which is probably what I have to do. I think my opponent just has too much value, though. I'm not sure exactly what I'm looking for that is going to help me beat all of these things at the same time. Like, the 4/4s are nice. Land is not going to do it. Solitude is cool. Solitude. Restoration of Aganjo is not an instant, unfortunately. And this is probably the point where I lose to either the combo or just 3 construct tokens hitting me. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Active abilities cost 4 more, but it's 5 to get a Painter back, 7 to activate. Alright, they're going for Phyrexian Dragon Engine instead. This is probably one of those times where it doesn't matter too much which way they go about this. This is probably an all roads still lead to victory moment. Like, I can block 2 of these, take 9, stay alive for another turn. I'm more likely to win by timeout than anything else right now. A Welder on top of all that. Yep. I'll now make 2 1/1s. Well, that makes me the Monarch. That's worth something. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Draw another removal spell, I guess. Yeah? Deck. Okay. We're dead. We should die this turn. How we die is a mystery, but we should die. Alright, it is death via large constructs. Yeah, that'll do. So, towards the end of that game, definitely feeling my mulligan to 5, just being down a couple of cards in a value-oriented matchup. We did not need much more to win that game. Like, a land slightly earlier to play that Court of Grace or that Archon earlier, and we pretty easily win. Okay, so Moat is very good versus my opponent's mid-range plan of Urza Saga construct tokens, and an enchantment is really hard to remove. If I hedge against Painter a little bit, I can probably do Moat. I like Solitude conceptually. Surgicals aren't crazy, but they're not fantastic either. If this attacking is not going to be a win condition anymore because of Moat, I'll probably pull those. Maybe pull one of these. I think Court of Grace matters quite a bit. I think Suppression Field is good. I think the Phantom's good. I don't know that I have room for the Surgicals. This hand's slow. Stands really slow. Boat's powerful sometimes. I think I would like to leverage the fact that I am on the play better than this. This is not great. I'm going to keep it, but we are potentially going to have the same problem as last time, where I just don't get to play my 3 and 4 drops, and then I don't play Magic. And if I don't play Magic for a little while, that is just terrible for me. Sure. Ancient Tomb, best draw probably. That's not bad either. The Wolf Phantom, destroying the Urza Saga is just converting it into a basic mountain, which is like fine, so my opponent doesn't drown me in creatures here. But it's not actually true land destruction, it's just conversion. Blah. Okay, I've got a Swords to Plowshares for that. Also got a Path to Exile, apparently. So, Swords Painter, crash in for 2. Don't have the land that I need to get my engine going. My opponent has an engine going, assuming that they have another land. Yes, they do. Alright. My creature does fly. That's the good news. We'll send this in. Opponent goes to 17. I am going to take the time to play an Archon. In some absolute worst case scenarios, I can die to Painter Grindstone in the next turn cycle. But I think playing the Archon helps a lot with the mid-rangey stuff that might be coming up. It's floating mana. That's scary. That Ancient Tomb enters tapped. Did you think that was going to enter untapped? I think they thought that was going to enter untapped. Ensnaring Bridge. Yes. Ensnaring Bridge is quite good for me. Thank you. Like, really quite good. So these fly. I still get to attack in with them. I have double Path to Exile available for opposing creatures. I don't even know that I would kill an Urza Saga Construct token with a Path to Exile right now, because my opponent is about to play cards that are going to keep this from attacking. Like, I'll take 4. Yeah, I'm absolutely not firing off a removal spell on this right now. You can have the damage. I am winning the theoretical race right now. Painter's Servant. You got it. Alright, so we just need to sit on the Path to Exiles here. Now this is unfortunately going to be my 1 spell per turn. Yeah. But now my opponent, well, they can attack with the construct again. Alright, cool. Combat. Send it. And again, I am winning the race here, so my opponent needs to play more cards. Each time they play a card, it becomes harder and harder for them to continue to attack with this construct token. And if they don't win this game, they are very likely to time out in the next one. I'll take that. Oh wow, they're taking Ancient Tomb damage here. Excuse me? Wild. Don't know that that is particularly castable in this deck. But you've got it. Sure. Now, for mana reasons, I will Path to Exile this, play Court of Grace on an empty board, and see if we race that Planeswalker. A little weird with Ensnaring Bridge there. These are going to be 4/4s we don't actually want. I'm not great at answering artifacts and enchantments, right? Yeah, I am not. Prevail land. Yeah, we'll see. This is definitely scary. There's a Chandra emblem. So, I make a friend. Don't know what to say there. Alright. Draw my card. It's an Archon. That's not bad. It's not great either. It's something that can potentially attack opponent nearing the point of timeout. I will almost certainly win this match if I win this game. Fury. Sure. Oh, is my opponent going to become the Monarch? Oh, opponent, with your Ensnaring Bridge. That's not what you probably want to do. Thank you. So, my opponent gets to become the Monarch. But this means that I am making 1/1s that can more easily attack, and that this might not just be plussing into Oblivion here. Yeah, I am ultimately good with this. Like, if my opponent just sat back and let me make 4/4s that could never attack, I don't know that this goes well for me. Alright. So this is my 1 spell. Wasteland Elegant Parlor. Let's hold it for an Urza Saga. Yeah, the reality may just be that my opponent with Reflection of Kiki, Jiki, Fury, and me missing on removal, that they just kill me in 2 turns with these emblems. But I have 4 damage in the air. So, damn it. I have to block the Fury or it kills me. This is putting me to 1. I don't know that I have outs here. Phyrexian Dragon Engine, sure. I take 3 in upkeep, make 2 friends. I draw a Swords. My opponent just has too many creatures here. Like, there's 5 things here. I can block a bunch of them. I just die to my next trigger. That is a very disappointing loss. Okay, we have a reasonable opening hand here. We're not turboing out a lock piece. We have a turn 2 lock piece. We have a turn 1 removal spell if our opponent plays, you know, a Delver, a DRC, a Tamiyo, something like that. Actual Factual Tundra and Tamiyo, sure. I believe for curve purposes, I am just going to Swords to Plowshares this rather than waiting to play around Days. I would really like to play the Suppression Field on my turn to make fetch lands worse for the rest of the game. Fantastic. Oh shit, okay. So, Wasteland, blow up Tundra, shut off Days, Mox Diamond, discard Flagstones, play Suppression Field, shutting off fetch lands, assuming it resolves. It does. Now, I'm going to need a third land. Once I get a third land, I can recur Wasteland, I can get an Archon in play to really make the Suppression Fields hit hard. Esper build. Opponent playing Psychic Frog, shocked Pikachu face. To try and keep a Psychic Frog from coming down next turn, I am going to play an Archon here. Now, this could get Dazed. Daze requires this land going back to hand, in which case a Psychic Frog does not get played next turn. It is Force of Will instead. Sure. That's terrible for us. That is a non-fetch land, and our opponent has dodged our Suppression Field and gotten the Psychic Frog into play. So we knew that this was the thing that needed to be played around, but we did not successfully do so. So, now this Psychic Frog is going to eat us alive. It seems like my opponent has another counterspell, and they are just deciding whether or not this is worthy of it. They think it is worthy. So now, unfortunately, Psychic Frog gets to just take over this game. It's a 1-card win condition, so it'll take a few turns. We're pretty unlikely to win this game from here. And this is the power of Psychic Frog, unfortunately. Now, we have somewhere on the order of 10 single target removal spells in our deck, so, like, maybe we can claw our way out of this. But every turn, my opponent just gets to draw another card with Psychic Frog. Any cards that they don't like or don't think will be good just get converted into extra damage as well. And our opponent just had 3 lands, none of which interacted with Suppression Field to start off the game. So, yeah. Snowball card gonna snowball. And now we're at the point where even if I do draw a relevant spell, it's pretty unlikely to resolve. My opponent has had a few Psychic Frog draws. There's also no guarantee that my opponent does not have an Entomb package in their deck. I think going into the 3rd color means that that's less likely, but it's not impossible. Yeah, so ban Psychic Frog, please. Okay, thanks, bye. Another non-fetch land. Ugh. Note that we are a little heavy on mana in this deck just due to the deck's design. So my experience here is not necessarily an uncommon one. We started off the game with a really good balance of mana and spells. All right, more Bowmasters, sure. I think I'm going to take one more draw and then just give up. Like, the Psychic Frog has done the Psychic Frog thing, and I am now just buried in cards. For sure. And a land drop to round out the turn. Hey, what's a Daze and why would I care about it? I think I'm just going to cast this now. I could wait to cast this, and then my opponent can't hard cast a Force of Will. But I think if this spell resolves, doesn't resolve, I'm just conceding. So I've answered the Psychic Frog, but my opponent has drawn so many cards with it that now, like, it's okay that they got 2-for-1 by Solitude. They still just have a bunch of power in hand because Psychic Frog has drawn them, I don't know, like 4 cards or something like that for 2 mana. And a Murktide Regent. Sure. Yeah, this is pretty awful. And at this point, we are dead on board. So we'll take a couple extra removal spells here. I'll probably go down Restoration of a Ganjo. That did not feel particularly strong. We'll probably call that good. 6 mana sources, not going to be reasonable here. Whereas this hand is fine. We'll keep this, getting rid of 1 copy of Ancient Tomb. We have relatively stable mana. I don't have removal for Psychic Frog. We'll kind of learn how many basics our opponent has in their deck. I might just be jamming Archon into Daze, though, immediately. Again, keeping Psychic Frog out of play is so central due to the snowballing effect that it has on games. Playing a white Orchid Phantom on myself to ramp myself is an option here. But that doesn't keep Psychic Frog out of play, which is, I think, the most important thing right now. So let's try this. Not expecting it to work between Daze and Force of Will. Oh, well, I'm fucking wrong. ETB tapped land is great. Ooh. Probably just jam that. A little weird versus Bowmasters. It's a little too weird versus Bowmasters for me to jam immediately, I think. I'm just going to attack Underground Sea, see if my opponent has a basic swamp. Again, we're just trying to keep Psychic Frog out of play. Fuck yeah, no basic lands. That's really good information. All right, there's a Swords. Okay, so that land now enters untapped. I'll attack for 2. Yeah. Opponent's at 16. I think playing Court of Grace is reasonable this turn, but my opponent has showed me no basic lands, and we are just trying to keep Psychic Frogs out of play. For Rainstorm. If this resolves, I'm going after the other Underground Sea. I don't care about Swords to Plowshares, but I do certainly care about Psychic Frog. I think my opponent showed us a Scrubland, so there's still definitely a fetchable black source in there. Alright, there is the Psychic Frog. We are going to attempt to Path to Exile that. We're not going to get cute and try to do it in combat and make our opponent discard an extra card or anything. We want to remove this creature and then stick Court of Grace. Cool. We know our opponent does not have basics. We just get that value. Send them. 10. Now we can play Court of Grace without losing any life here and draw our extra card. Great. Single target removal is exactly what I want. Again, cards like Psychic Frog and Murktide Regent that can singularly take over the game. We need to stop those. Cameo is fine in that it's not as big of a problem as the other cards. Serenity? Sure? Okay. Serenity blows up Court of Grace. I think my opponent's life total is low enough that I can just use Swords to Plowshares on Tameo. It gives my opponent 0 life. Attack for 4. Put them to 5. And limp over the aggro line, even if my future draws aren't particularly strong. Alright, goodbye Court of Grace. No more Angels, but I'm still the Monarch. Okay, we get there. So, when I am on the draw, do I want to go down a couple of copies of Court of Grace because they are expensive, to play a couple copies of Restoration of Aganjo, to get back White Orchid Phantom, Suppression Fields, and Wastelands? Court of Grace is one of my best tools as this game goes long, but now my opponent knows that their Bowmaster is good, so I can hedge against that a little bit. But Restoration of Aganjo just does not have the same punch that a Court of Grace does. So I might do something like that and kind of split the difference. Knowing that my opponent has 0 basic lands also changes my evaluation of White Orchid Phantom a bit. So bringing that back with a Restoration of Aganjo is not bad. This is a medium opening hand that I don't think I am going to mulligan, but I'm also not happy with. My turn 1 is weak. My turn 2 and on are good. So we're hoping to avoid a turn 1 Tameo. Nope. Court of Grace, sure. Not what I'm looking for. I don't believe that I'm going to Solitude the Tameo. Sometimes we kind of deal with the Tameo clues in another way. So I think we're letting our opponent investigate here and being more prepared to deal with other things, which my opponent is not playing. Ancient Tomb. Sure. Probably start here. Get rid of the plains. Play Ancient Tomb. I think I am interested in Archon. If this resolves and sticks around and my opponent plays something like a Psychic Frog, I can then follow up with a Solitude and know that the Solitude is going to resolve. I I think it's just going to eat a Fatal Push or a Swords to Plowshares. Orcish Bowmasters instead. Sure. That's like totally fine. It means that I'm more likely to pitch Court of Grace to Solitude than anything else. No Tameo attack into my 2/3, which doesn't kill it? Okay. I think I'm just going to land, pass, and flash in a Solitude. Okay, we're staring at each other. That's fine. Tapped land again. All right, opponent chilling. I think my plan here is hard cast this. See how my opponent reacts to this. Yeah, that's fine. Sure. So now we'll go land drop into Restoration. Cool. I get a Plains, and then we'll pass the turn. I'd like to get this Bowmaster out of play so my Court of Grace can do something, because it's quite potent right now. It seems like my opponent might be going for the Planeswalker this turn. They've been not attacking with this, and now all of a sudden they are attacking with it. So it seems like they are going to double crack clues. Yeah, that is their plan. Sure. The Tameo is not like super strong right now. ETB tapped lands. Ugh. These are some stinkers. I mean, I'll discard the Ancient Tomb. I'll return the Plains to play. I'll play a Plains. I'm gonna hope to get a little lucky here, honestly. I think I have to play this Court of Grace, despite the awkwardness. Like, my opponent still has 5 cards. The Psychic Frogs and Murktide Regents of the world are scary. Murktide Regent less so than Psychic Frog. So I just need to use this, and I'm not attacking the Tameo intentionally. I need to use this to try to find something to help me break this game open. Maybe another Court of Grace does that. Another single target removal spell is very good here. Okay. So I think I take out the Bowmaster here. Leave my opponent with the 2/2. They become the Monarch. They'll take an extra card. And then hopefully I just Court of Grace my way to victory. Now my attacks are all bad. Need to draw a single target removal spell. Take your card. So I make a 1/1 since I'm not the Monarch. Whiff on single target removal spell. Stifle. Rough. But I guess that's better than getting this one stifled. Alright, I am the Monarch. I'll draw my card. Whiff. So this is threatening ultimate, which is awful. That is also awful. So now I'm no longer going to be the Monarch. Cool. I am not entirely convinced that Swords to Plowshares is great here, but it's probably fine. So I take 3, lose the Monarch. My opponent effectively gets 2 cards from that combat step between Psychic Frog and the Monarch trigger. I make some 1/1s. They are not going to do anything in time. That Wasteland doesn't matter. I have a gajillion mana. Yeah, we just whiff again. So my opponent is going to get to draw half of their deck there. They can then dump those cards into Psychic Frog, remove 2 Spirit tokens, and kill me. So we can speed that along. GG's. All right, we have kind of a mid-opening hand here for our final round. We'll see if we can put a win on the board with this deck. We've got a couple of removal spells. We have Karakas for a legendary creature. We have, wow, an Inquisition of Kozilek. That's a little strange. We might be playing against something like Pox. Pox or Depths are probably the most likely things. IOK is just relatively rare. So conceptually, I was hoping to play this like Wasteland, bring back Wasteland with Restoration of a Ganjo mid-range game. We might not be seeing that here. Yeah, this is weird. My Pox sense is tingling. Basic land is solid here. We'll just do that and pass. We'll see if we've got... Okay, it is a Surveil land. Loam Pox? Eh? Oh. This is not going to be enjoyable. So my opponent's ultimate goal is probably to keep me from drawing relevant cards by milling me. So my Path to Exile, Swords to Plowshares type cards are probably not strong. Sure. Alright, I get the White Orchid Phantom. I don't really want to draw that Mox Diamond. I think I just like playing Restoration of a Ganjo this turn, though. I think getting this value-oriented play going is good. This also gives me a shuffle for the Mox Diamond, or not. I can White Orchid Phantom from Graveyard on my turn if my opponent thought seizes it away. I think it's more likely that they take my Court of Grace, though. Yes, I do lose the Court of Grace. My opponent's draw is perhaps not ideal. I don't want to draw this card. So let's play this turn a little differently than what I thought I might do. Let's Wasteland that. Discard a Mox Diamond. Return a Wasteland to play. It's tapped. Let's play the basics here. So go 1 and 2. White Orchid Phantom. Destroy my Flagstones, which gives me a shuffle. Pull some lands out of deck. And call it a turn. Not looking to draw Path to Exile in this matchup. I don't even know if my opponent is going to have any creatures. Ensnaring Bridge. That's a problem. Yep. Okay, that name's Wasteland. That was expected. Basic Plains, not what I am looking for. We'll send in for some points of damage. My opponent can't yet play this Ensnaring Bridge. That's the good news. I don't need to deal that much damage to kill my opponent. So, I was expecting my opponent to crack Vexing Bauble to draw Ensnaring Bridge, hope that their next card is a land to just play Ensnaring Bridge immediately, but they did not do that. Okay, so now they've got the memo. All right, there's the Urza Saga. I don't get to Wasteland that because of Pithing Needle. Bridge is not in play yet. I'm going to draw a bad card. So, yeah, combat, send in. I've made a 1/1, which is useful. I'll pass the turn. Cards like Thoughtseize are going to get stuck in my opponent's hand if I lower their life total enough, so that's good. There's Ensnaring Bridge. I still get to attack with a 1/1. And Archon of Emeria is still like a perfectly reasonable card to play. And my opponent let me draw it. Great. Send in for 1. Opponent is at 8. I'll drop an Archon and pass my turn. So my opponent is going to shuffle away their Thoughtseize. Extirpate is whatever. Opponent floating mana here. Codex Shredder. And now mill and manipulate tops of library. My Suppression Field is pretty good versus that sort of stuff. Extirpate Restoration of Aganjo. Sure. Slightly surprised to see that being taken over Court of Grace here. Manipulating 2 of my cards at the same time seems kind of tough. Now this did shuffle. It gives me another Archon. I'm fine with that draw. My opponent is getting attacked for 5 this turn. Oh, sorry. I thought they had another card. Being attacked for 1. Down to 7. Drop another Archon. Call it a turn. And they're going to take that off the top of their library. Sure. That brings them down to 0 cards. I now don't get to attack. I could Path to Exile one of my own creatures to get a redraw for the Mox Diamond. I don't really know that that's worth it, especially when my opponent has double Lantern. So we'll pass the turn. This is going to be pretty boring. I'm not going to lie to you. Liliana of the Veil is not currently castable. That's a card that can get stuck in my opponent's hand. So I'll drop a land, pass the turn. My opponent mills that. My opponent is probably on track to just mill out, to time out if we have to play a couple of games here. I have so many cards like Suppression Field in my deck that are just going to be a pain in the butt for my opponent trying to keep their things going that I don't think this is going to go well for my opponent in the very long term. So I'll play this. I'll still target the land. I don't know how many basics they have. Not enough. Not enough is the answer. Oseju, sure. This can become a copy of these other things. Don't really view that as a problem. We're just going to play a land. Then I'll put another creature into play. I don't really care about it being a removal spell. Mox Diamond, a weak draw. And our opponent has some milling things to do. This is where, like, hedging my deck versus the Psychic Frog format is coming to bite me in the butt when someone registers Codex Shredder. Sure. Not having outs to Ensnaring Bridge in my deck is a deck building oversight. That's not really a card that I was thinking about when I constructed this deck list. The good news is that's the last Mox Diamond that we can possibly draw. Opponent keeping their bauble. Sure. This is just another one of the same things. Their Vexing Bauble counters their own spell. I draw Mox Diamond. More Path to Exile coming up. And then we'll see some milling. Alright, so that becomes another Codex Shredder. That's fine. What does this do at 5? Return target card from your graveyard to your hand. Yeah, that's fine. I think this game has lost entertainment value. I'm going to give you relevant updates. Alright, so my opponent has used the vast majority of their clock to play one game of Magic. They can't, they just don't have enough time to play another game like that. They did eventually deck me via Codex Shredders and Lantern of Insight manipulation. I didn't look at the counter at the bottom. I imagine it was somewhere around turn 30 by the time that was all said and done. Unfortunately, my deck is slanted in very different directions here. We don't have like Null Rods, Lorens, that sort of stuff, which I really need to easily beat in Snaring Bridge. Thorn of Amethyst is great. Deafening Silence is not particularly strong, but can help my opponent from going Hellbent. I will probably do that. I don't think I'm interested in Surgical. Path to Exiles can technically let me shuffle. That doesn't feel that good, though. Surgical can do the same thing without costing mana. Vexing Bauble is a thing. This is just another body, though. It's an overly expensive body, but it's a body. So we are looking to be the beatdown here. This is turn 1 Deafening Silence, but it doesn't really have enough mana to do the things that are going to let me succeed in this matchup. I'm going to mulligan this one. If we just mulligan into Oblivion and have no game, I will be upset. Alright, so if we're not in a hurry, I can turn 2 Suppression Field. But I kind of think we're in a hurry. I don't want to lose this to an Inquisition or Thoughtseize. It's an incredibly important card for the matchup. I'm going to keep this, get rid of Chrome Mox, and probably Restoration? Probably Restoration. So, Mox Diamond, discard Caracas, and immediately drop Suppression Field. Hopefully we draw a land, play an Archon, and then just kind of get ahead of all the nonsense that my opponent is doing. Okay, sure. Deafening Silence is not what I'm looking for here. That land is, though. We'll take that. There's an Ensnaring Bridge coming. Urza Saga is fine with a Suppression Field in play, though. And these don't produce black mana to take this from my hand, so this is fine. Cool, I get my land. So, yeah. So my opponent can get their Ensnaring Bridge. They have a bunch of cards in hand. It is hard for them to easily advance their game. They get one spell per turn. And then we just kind of see how well we top deck here. My opponent can manipulate draws, in theory, but all this stuff is more expensive and my opponent does not have mana. So, yeah. Yeah, so notice how my opponent has to just concede immediately because they know that they can't win this game. Like, that is the downside of playing a deck that looks like theirs. I don't really have any adjustments that I can make. You're just looking to keep a hand with an early Suppression Field or Thorn or something like that and go from there. This is maybe not my ideal, but it's not bad. My opponent is in high danger of timing out this game. I'm not going to like maximum grief them on every stop or whatever. Ooh. Thorn? Just Thorn immediately? Yeah. 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 And yeah. Makes my Restoration of Aganjos harder to play, but it makes my opponent's entire deck harder to play. Like, everything that's not a land is impacted by that. Alright, they're just choosing to randomly mill me here. Deafening Silence is not strong. I could just lose to random Urza Sagas if I never draw lands again. That would be disappointing. Yeah, there's another land. We could just lose to a couple of Urza Saga tokens if I don't draw lands. If I draw lands, I am not worried about that. Like, the Court of Grace style cards will do serious work. But sometimes this happens. This is a little frustrating. Like, we are so good against Urza Sagas with Wastelands and Knight of the White Orchid. And Suppression Fields. Oh my god, deck. Uh, that is beyond frustrating. Yep. You are late to the party, Wasteland. My opponent will mill these lands off the top, knowing that I need them. Sure. And my opponent will mill these lands out. Oh, no, they're going to let me keep one. Sure. Pick 10. Not great. All right, there is a Knight of the White Orchid. I'm going to concede here. And we lost to the Lantern of Insight pile, which is a bad sign. All right, overall thoughts on the deck list. Close, but not quite there. Running into Ensnaring Bridge multiple times throughout the league was incredibly unfortunate. Very obviously after the first draft, I immediately realized that I had forgotten something that was an out to that, some sort of Lauren disenchant effect, whatever. So that needs to be in here somewhere. As far as a Suppression Field deck goes, this was not bad at leaning into that strategy. Like, I am overall happy with the cards right here and how they interacted. I am overall happy with Court of Grace. The Restoration of a Ganjo portion of the deck list didn't really pop off today. We didn't do a lot of returning the 2-drops that really would give us the value that I need. So maybe Restoration of a Ganjo becomes some other mid-range card, like Palace Jailer. Like you play 8 Monarch effects so you can more effectively take it back, have more single target removal to take out the Psychic Frogs and Eldrazi and stuff that you're expecting. Probably trim 1 mana source from the deck somewhere, probably 1 land. Like have a playset of Palace Jailer or whatever mid-range card advantage cards you want to have, and I think that's reasonable. Probably junk the Moats from the sideboard for 2 Laurens or another disenchant effect of some kind. So thumbs down for battle effectiveness. Conceptually, the deck is okay, but ultimately, trying to play a Suppression Field deck in Legacy is probably just something you should not do anymore. Many years ago, like early on when I started playing Legacy, like you could play these games that dragged on for 15, 20 turns, really lock opponents out. And now there's just so many main deckable answers to stuff. Your Teferis, your Boseijus, that sort of stuff. And cards also just kill people faster. And in the world where there are both more answers to permanent-based haste than ever, and the threats are better than ever, it is probably not the time to be playing these prison effects, but damn it, we've got to try. It is fun to do so. Like, this was an enjoyable league, despite the fact that I got bodied. Anyway, I hope you all have a wonderful rest of the day. If you need some cards, toamagic.com, promo code ThrabenU, let them know that I sent you. All right, see ya.